Hey there, I'm John.
I'm Tyrone.
And I'm James.
And we're RÜFÜS DU SOL.
And we're doing a deep dive into our album, Inhale, Exhale.
On Triple J.
We started working on this album, I guess, officially a year and a half ago. So it was kind of April of 2023 was when we did our first session working on the album. We did like a 2-week block. And, we had recently moved. Me and John had moved to Miami. Tyrone had moved south of LA to Encinitas near San Diego. So in order to start working together, we tried sort of bouncing ideas back and forth. Remotely, that hadn't quite gelled. And so we decided to start doing some 2-week writing blocks. So we went to Austin. We set up in a studio there. And yeah, that was the first time we'd been in a room together since we were on tour for like 2 years off the back of our last record.
I think we were all probably a bit nervous to get in the room together because we hadn't been together for, a solid few months. We'd been touring, and it's a different energy to get in a studio and to write. Our previous albums, we've lived together pretty much. We'd be, working pretty consistently, and we'd have almost endless time in a studio to be able to workshop ideas and to see an album through. So I think we were all a little nervous. And when we got in there, it was, I think the first day we were all, we had a chat at the end of the day, and I remember that being really grounding and exciting. And I think we all had the same goals of just wanting to have fun in the studio. And after that, it was pretty quickly like probably the most prolific we'd been in the studio, just because we really valued the time that we got together. We'd start our days with some exercise, maybe a cold plunge, a coffee, not as good as the Australian coffees. And then we'd get in the studio and kind of just see what happens. And I think over a few months, we'd collected a bunch of different ideas for me, whether it's lyrics, vocal melodies, and for the guys, it was a lot of beats, any starting chords, and just aesthetics to kind of song starters, essentially, just to get the ball moving faster. So I think that all helped for us to be able to see ideas through really fast.
And one of those initial 2-week blocks, we definitely had some sparks of ideas that made it on the record. Even some of the prep work that we did before those 2 weeks were pretty crucial to starting to find some links in between the songs, just aesthetically.
I think when we write a record, we don't really know what we're doing at the start. We kind of go in there with a clean blank slate, and we just start making stuff and seeing what we connect with. And eventually, somewhere along the line, like 50 to 70% of the way through making an album, the beast starts to reveal itself, and you're like, okay, this is what it is. And that's what happened for us on this one. We'd written a lot of songs, had a lot of unfinished ideas, but there was a good idea of what the album was feeling like. And we had explored more territory than we'd ever explored before, both in tempos and aesthetically as well, in terms of the sounds that we were using. I think the name actually came from us. It was our manager's idea, and it was to get like a breathwork studio that's in Venice, and we had a few friends and a few people in the industry come in and do a breathwork session for 20 minutes, which is intense in itself. And you're lying down, you have masks on, and you like buzzing. And then we played 5 songs from the record that were complete. I guess some of them were incomplete, but for the most part, they were complete. And it was a really cool experience. And I think off the back of that, we were like, this feels like an important part of the record, the tone, like inhale, exhale. Can't remember how the name came to be, but we also really loved the idea of it being 2 names. I think our first 4 albums have been single name titles, and we're really excited about trying new things on this record. So we're like, it's a very small shift, but I think it does stem outwards from there,
It was exciting to be able to shape that material into these 2 big sections rather than one big long arc like we have done in the past, which was another exciting thing of pushing ourselves to do something different. And so in the middle of the record now, we have what could have been, an album closer potentially, but just a break in the album is what it's become, or a faux finish in a way for myself. So that's New York is the track, and sort of you get to come down a little bit before we bring you back into the depths of the record.
I think it's interesting because this is definitely our most maximal record in terms of it's a 15-track record. Traditionally, we've done 9 or 10 or 11 tracks. So, and the fact that it has this dual arc, I think opens it up to, like, primarily, I think it's listening to it in one go is the ideal kind of way to consume it. And that's like when we finally got the masters back, like maybe a month ago or a month and a half ago. Like I was driving out to Joshua Tree for a friend's birthday, and I had it was my first experience listening to the album in full and to the mastered tracks. And as I was going out there was some like bushfires nearby, and the sky became kind of apocalyptic. But it was this experience of listening to the full thing in one go, and there was this like visual kind of imagery to accompany it. And that was just one example where that the journey that I had visually, but also in listening to this record we made, was really special. Like any setting where taking it in one go is like what we created it for. But also I love the idea, and we've discussed this, that people might make their own little, might go to a different section of it at a different point in their life, or if they're connecting to a different sound, because it does cover a spectrum of, emotion, at least for us. There's light and shade, there's a range of tempos, there's, different forms of impact in the record. There's one thing that comes to mind is this track called In the Moment, which is, it's right before kind of the halfway point on the record. And I really love that. Basically the beat, I think Tyron basically had this idea to try and do like a krautrock beat. So like and we were sort of trying to make that work for us. It didn't really feel like it was gelling sonically. We were trying to chop up actual beats. So then we were like, what if we chop up like the sound of clocks ticking and sort of like reinterpret those? And we were processing them through like granular delays and sort of chopping that up. And basically with the idea of like this artist called Trent Tamola, who we love, in mind. So it's kind of like glitchy but organic. And I really love that turned into quite a textural beat that still, when it hits in the chorus, it's very driving. And then we kind of scattered those clock sounds through the record. Like the intro track has clocks ticking, and there's this cross-pollination of like sonic detail that we really love, pulling from other tracks and reinterpreting it.
There's a moment in the track New York, and which I think is a pretty cool producery sort of nerdy thing, is that me and James were working in the studio in Miami and hearing this constant, very rhythmic, like jackhammering. They're building like a new piece of art outside our building, which was great timing for us. But it started to be quite repetitive, and James had the idea to go outside and start recording it. So we used both of our phones to. He used both of our phones to record it outside on our balcony. With a lot of the record and a lot of the found sounds or Foley that we started implementing, we loved this idea of starting to saturate and enhance and really give more detail to things. And that track starts with this jackhammering, slow jackhammering, and then it sort of starts to develop from there. And then serendipitously, I think, as we were starting to finish that track, we were on our way into the studio in LA all together. And I think I was driving at the time, and there was a really loud screeching truck, kept breaking its wheels right next to our car. And James was leaning out of the car at one point trying to record it and get me to speed up and slow down to get the perfect recording. And so that screech sound sort of enters into the first sort of bass part of New York.
The one thing I know for us is that we pour everything into every record, and we have fun in the process. There's, cross-pollination of lyrics that, we write songs and we don't have an idea of the record at the start. But once we get to 70, 80% of a record, when we're finishing lyrics within songs, like, the intro track is setting up the second track lately by talking about light and daylight, and Yeah, I think that's kind of how, like, the amount of references that we have towards air and breath and lungs, like, it's just scattered. I just think that just like it's like a production tool in that it makes this one world of this one record sound like a cared for, considered space where you can tell that we didn't just like put songs together, like we really made a thing that is its own little package of a world that we made. I really love that for us, it's kind of like two ecosystems that we work in. It's like the live and then the recording writing. And they definitely both influence each other, but I think that we are pretty good at being in those individual worlds when we're in them. So when we get in the studio, we definitely in the studio writing for ourselves and playing, like everyone will get on, you know, whatever tool that they want, whatever synthesizer or drums, percussion. It's just like a very free place where there's no real rules. I don't think we're writing from the place of, oh, let's do this so we can do it live. I think we really write albums for an album. You know, we love albums. We love the journey and the medium of an album, like the start, the finish, the middle, and the aesthetic, and they really serve as like a time stamp for us. It's like a unintentional diary entry of like our 2 years in that moment in our lives. But I definitely do think that somewhere towards the end of the stage of writing songs, there's like an awareness for all of us. We're like, oh, this is going to be really cool to play live. Or maybe we can do this like this live. Like maybe we strip it back even more and we do it, you know, out here, or let's beef it up. Like for one of the songs for Pressure, the main bass line is like this, it's a big bass line. It's kind of, I guess we'd always wanted to do like an Arctic Monkeys a big riff.
A massive riff.
A massive riff. And that was our like, you know, working out how to do it. That was where we ended up and like, okay, cool. But that is one of the examples where we're kind of taking a thing from a studio and shifting it to the live show and playing with the medium and going like, oh, maybe this would look and feel really cool if I was in the audience.
I was really excited about having build-ups where there would be like a sort of break beat in a very 90s way, a kind of very vinyl-y break beat as a build tool. So, you know, we treat it specifically. We spend time on like the treatment of it, and it doesn't necessarily sound like a real drum kit. It sounds more indebted to like, you know, just 90s broken beat electronic music. But then the idea that there is an idea there that then when we do the live show and we split the parts up and then I'm on a kit, I'm excited to figure out how to play that live, and the sonic will be different to what we do on the record and the choices we make on the record, but it still is an inspiration for something that will be fun to do in the live show.
It's the longest album we've ever put out, so I'm really excited for people to realize that they've only just heard just a small fraction of what's out there. And it's a track called Levitating that I was listening to the other night with some friends, and it's so powerful, yet so minimal. So it's based around this songwriting and repetition, and it's got lots of different elements, I think, of all three of our different influences. I think that's going to really, I think that along with some other tracks is really going to find some love amongst different people and different groups.
I love the closing track. We have a lot of fun when we make the closing track of an album. It's always like a fun, free moment for us. We're like, how do we want to leave people with this album? And we were challenging ourselves to do something different. I think in the past, we usually do, you know, a 5-6 minute plus longer escapade journey of a track, which is so fun and we love to do it. But we're like, how do we, you know, do the thing that people don't expect? So we limited ourselves to not having any percussion, essentially, like no full-blown beat. And we have a vocoder, and it's basically trying to work with just the vocal melody. So there's only like chords happening when the vocal is happening at the start. And we're kind of building the song from there. We wrote it in the one session. We had coffee in the morning. We were like, what do we want to do? We want to write the closing record today, like song of the record today. And we went in and we did it. And it's really rare that that happens, that you write a song and 80% of it is done within the day. For us, that's really rare. It happened a few times on this record, but that was one of those times, and it was just really special. Like the vocal takes, the lyrics, they're all from, it's definitely 24 hours, whether it was day 1 or day 2, but they're all there and they didn't change. We were like, okay, this is perfect.
Fire Desire began, their working title was Vacuum, because we were writing it on Solace when all the project titles were like space related. We tried a bunch of things on that to get it onto that record, Solace. Nothing was really working, so it went to the shelf. We revisited it for Surrender, and I think we added a few more elements that felt like it gave it a lift we really wanted. And I guess me and Tyron were pushing for it really hard, and thankfully John was like, I'm not sure about this yet. I'm not quite sure if this, if basically it felt like it was maybe a bit all over the place stylistically. And, we listened to that and we're like, we want all three of us to feel aligned on something. If we're going to put it out into the world, it's not like a 2-verse-1 thing. We're like, we want to all feel good about it. So back on the shelf. And then we revisited on this record. Finally, we found a direction we were all aligned on. And then we kind of worked on it remotely. Like me and John were working on it in Miami on the sort of drum programming and getting the synth gating right. So it was like had this really specific locked groove, bouncing back and forth. And then the more we started playing it to friends, the more we were like, this is sick. This sounds great. We made tweaks, got the bass pulse kind of, this kind of like womp, this subtle gating that gave it an extra kind of like heave and, lurching kind of feeling. And that breakdown I think it's one of my favorite breakdowns that we've ever made.
One of the things that happens when writing a record, we've probably got a bunch of songs on the shelf at the moment, and sometimes things just need to mature a bit. And this idea really, I think, benefited from some maturing. Mm-hmm. And now it's got such a badass feel to it. It's really stepped into its own. And it's one of my favorite tracks on the record now, from being something that I really was against, like when we were still trying to find its identity. I mean, in terms of maybe not necessarily what's influenced our record, but what we're really enjoying, the people are pushing boundaries, the people like Jamie XX. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy Glass Beams at the moment as well. Mm. That's been like a really fun project that I like their aesthetic and the way that they're coming up. And I like that a lot of these artists are really focused on albums too.
We've always been fans of a group called Weevil. Love those guys. Again, like album focused, they put out these bodies of work, but really creative electronic project that is indebted also to like psychedelia as well as like, more dance floor oriented stuff.
Like I do feel like there is this weird cross-pollination within our music where it is rock influence or alternative influence. Like Fontaine's DC put out a record recently and that's just been like on repeat for me. And I love the lyrics. I love the aesthetic. I love that the album feels like an album. Yeah, I love albums. I don't really care about the genre, to be honest. And I like that about Triple J too, in that, it's like every genre is getting a platform to be heard by the country. And I love that. I feel like that's probably one of the reasons I really appreciate just good music regardless of the genre. My point is that I feel like we are lovers of music and I feel like they all serve a different purpose. Like club music is really cool for when the guys are doing DJ sets and they can move a crowd and shift a crowd's energy and like just by the change of a kick or the shift of a snare or whatever it is, it's, the subtleties are noticed within that specific space. And then there's the headphone listeners that are like connecting with a lyric or, a chord change. And I think we all love all of those things. And for whatever reason, the cross section of us three and our love of those different things ends up, becoming whatever the music is that we make. It's hard to know when we start looking at the next album because I guess we're so in this one and still ready to unleash this one with the world. It's like the two ecosystems. We do one and then we tour it and then we get really excited to get back into the studio again and then we really have a clean palette essentially we're re-inspired. We've listened to 2 years worth of music from whatever's come out. We've grown, learnt things, changed. And at that point, I feel like we're really ready to get in the studio. And that's why I feel like our albums are essentially like necessarily a very literal diary entry, but they're like a moment in time for us where this is what we listen to, this is what we're inspired by. It's like a reflection of that, and it's surmised into an album.
What we've been able to achieve is so much further beyond what our wildest dreams were. And that sounds like a trope or like, you know, a throwaway statement, but that is very literally true. It really is. So like, it is very surreal to think that we're in the position that we are and that we're able to do what we do. And that we have such a cool ecosystem we've created with each other that is so fun and is endlessly entertaining and endlessly inspiring. And, you know, just, yeah, that we've been able to build this thing with each other and just, and, you know, make music and do it for a living.
Triple